This is Rinat Zarbailov for inomind.org. Today I'm conversing with Ben Ringer. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Rinat.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Please briefly tell me what is it you do and a little brief history about yourself.
So I'm a professional musician. I'm a conductor, and I also do quite a bit of music teaching. I am music director of the New Jersey State Youth Orchestra, which is based in Middletown, New Jersey. We serve 100 students in Monmouth County between the ages of, second grade up through seniors in high school. We have 5 different ensembles, and I oversee what we do musically and artistically, and also conduct the high school group. I also teach at Musipire Music Center in Queens, and that's one-on-one lessons with students of all ages in guitar, piano, clarinet, ukulele, drums, and music theory. I think that's everything. That's what I do professionally, and then I also am assistant conductor of the Lesbian and Gay Big Apple Corps Symphonic Band, which is based here in Manhattan and is a 125-member wind and brass ensemble. So
I kind of got lost in everything you listed just now. How do you find time for all this? How do you manage it?
I realized a number of years ago that part of making a living as a working musician, especially in New York City where there's so many other people doing the same thing, is you just kind of have to be comfortable with working all the time. I do all of that, but it's less work than I did before the pandemic. I had another job as well doing music with preschool children, and that business closed. So yeah, it helps that I love what I do. That's the thing. I don't mind working long hours because I get to go to work every day and do the thing that I truly love.
So in most cases you teach, you don't make music. There's a saying, those who can do, those who can't teach. I'm going to be like
right, absolutely.
brutal here in this
case.
How do you, you must have mastered music at some at some point. I don't know, like how long you've been in music industry. What is it like for you as far as that particular quote? I think it was by Bernard Shaw. That said that.
I know that it makes an appearance towards the beginning of Annie Hall as he's reminiscing about his school days. So
Woody Allen.
Yeah, I can't say whether there's truth in that in terms of all other professions, but I think that when it comes to music, I don't actually think that's true. If you're not yourself a good player, then you're not going to be able to pass on that information to the next generation.
Right, you have to be top notch.
Exactly,
you can't just be inferior musician and then somewhat teach.
That's the thing, and there are there's a lot of different ways to make a living as a musician, and one of those is through the avenue of teaching. Now, fortunately, I get to do a lot of performing as well. As a conductor of a youth orchestra, we perform several times a year, and those are public concerts with the Lesbian and Gay Big Apple Corps, several concerts a year as well. But yeah, I love teaching, and it's good work, and it's work that I enjoy.
What's the top music school in New York, in your perception?
I think most people would say Juilliard.
Juilliard, right? It's not just performing arts, but it's also music as well, right?
Yes, they've got I think it's 3 different divisions at Juilliard. But yes, they are.
I think Robin Williams went to Juilliard, right?
Robin Williams, and a lot of other people went to the drama school.
Right. What inspired you in the first place to become a teacher, music teacher? Why teaching?
So initially, it was just something. It was just a way to pay the bills, And it's if you had asked me 15 years ago if I imagined myself making a living primarily as a teacher and working with kids, I think I would have said no. I'm going to be a performer. I'm going to be at Carnegie Hall and doing all of this. And it's not that there's still not some aspirations in that direction. It's never too late. But I realized that I loved working with kids. That was a revelation to me. And even if it's a piece of music that I've played 100 times and taught to 100 students, when a new student comes in and they're learning it for the first time, it's new to them. It's a surprise to them, and so it's always fresh. I've worked out of some of the same pieces, some of the same books for many years, and it still never gets old.
Who is it easier to teach? Kids or adults?
They're both challenging for different reasons. With kids, the intellect is not fully developed, particularly if they start at the age of 4, 5, 6, as many young piano students do. But they also know that they're kids, they're in school, they're in kindergarten, first grade. They understand that they're learning how to do the things that adults know how to do, and that there's going to be a period of time where they maybe don't get it so easily. With adults, there's sort of the opposite issue, which is that the intellect is fully developed, but there is going to be a lag between understanding up here, how do I move my fingers at the keyboard, how do I put my fingers on the fretboard of the guitar, versus actually being able to do that thing. And for some adults, it can be very frustrating because, I understand it, but my fingers just don't want to cooperate yet. They're both challenging for different reasons.
So there has to be some kind of synchronization between the brain and the soul or something, right? Like the left brain and the left part of the brain and the right part of the brain or something.
I think absolutely.
In terms of coordination, right? Like where to put this finger at what point, you know what I mean? Like in the case of playing guitar, for example.
Oh yeah, well in the case of playing any instrument, it's wonderful for the brain, because I think of it as like a juggler having to keep 15 different balls in the air at the same time. If you're reading piano music, you've got 2 different lines of music, one for the right hand, one for the left hand. You got to keep track of all 10 of those fingers.
Right.
The notes read differently for the right hand versus the left hand, and then on top of that, okay, what's the rhythm? What's the counting? Now, what are the interpretive instructions from the composer? Is it loud? Is it soft? Is there a slur? Is it staccato? And then that's just the beginning. Then how do I feel about it, and how do I help that take flight in my playing? Yeah, it's a million different things for the brain to keep track of.
How long does it take on average to learn the notes? The notes are the hardest part, right? Of getting to master music, for example.
Well, I mean, that's a complicated question.
Like your observation, how many years have you been teaching so far?
So I have been teaching here in New York City since 2008, so 13 years. Actually, 13 years this month. My observation is that, firstly, it correlates directly to how much time the student spends practicing. The more the student practices, you can have a really talented student who doesn't ever look at their music outside the lesson, and they won't progress very quickly. You can have a student who's just kind of, middle of the road in terms of their natural ability, but they really work at it 20, 30 minutes every day, sit and do the assignments. So it's hard to put a figure on it. I find that the greatest challenge, though, for many of my students is not just learning where to put their fingers. It's also being able to count the rhythms of the music simultaneously on the page, because it's not just what note do I play, it's how fast do I play it, what is its proportional size in relation to all the other notes around it. That's what rhythm is.
So 13 years, right, and going, let's say a new student comes in. Like, I mean, you probably, you're a teacher, right? So you judge, whether or not this person has a, potential or not. Like, how do you, like, do you tell them up front, like, I think you have something, or I think you will, like, in Russian they say, what do you call it? An elephant stepped on your ear or something like that.
I've never heard that. Right? I love that. Wow.
Like when you cannot really like get the notes right,
right,
or even singing, So like, how do you, like, I understand, like, if you are teaching someone for private lesson, right, they are your client, and then they, you kind of have to please them, or at least attempt to get them to a level that they're trying to achieve.
Sure.
But if you see, like, I'm sure you've seen, cases when you actually see there's no potential in this person, but he or she wants to become a musician. Like, what do you tell them, or how does it go?
So, that's such a good question. So, there is such a thing as being born with a greater degree of natural musical talent. Some people just pick it up really quickly. Absolutely. But I don't think that there is actually anybody who is unable to learn to play music. That being said, that doesn't mean you're going to be a professional player, but just to learn some of the fundamentals and to be able to play a few pieces of music that you might enjoy to play on whatever instrument you're learning. I tell a lot of the adult students who come in and they say, I'm 45, I'm 50, I'm however old, and I've never had music, and am I too old to learn? I say, well, can you count to 4? Well, yeah. Can you walk down the street without tripping over your feet? Okay, well then you have a steady sense of rhythm, and yeah, if you can count it,
takes, right?
that's all it really takes. And then it's a question of just learning to read the notes on the page and then translate that into action with the fingers, or in the case of a wind instrument, the breath or whatever.
I see. Now let's switch gears a little bit. During the COVID times, how has it been for you as far as teaching? I mean, teaching music, you have to be present, right? You have to be there to see, what they're doing, where the fingers go, in case of piano or guitar or whatnot, And by the way, how many instruments do you play?
I have to think about this. So guitar, clarinet, piano, ukulele, drum set. Officially 5. There's a few others that I could do some things with, but those are the ones I teach.
Right.
So
what was COVID, Corona times kind of? How has that played in your teaching?
It's definitely been a challenge. Initially when the pandemic started, it was just no work for a number of months, and then as things slowly started to reopen, I'm doing some in-person teaching now, which is, as you say, always preferable. It is definitely easier for a music lesson to be in the room with the students. When it comes to rehearsing with my youth orchestra kids, I mean, actually everybody being present, it's nearly impossible to rehearse without it because you have to play together at the same time. So online rehearsals have been challenging, and we have all of us had to adapt, and I definitely think that I've found ways. I've had to get comfortable doing some lessons online, on Zoom, on FaceTime, and there are certain compromises that you have to make. Normally on piano or guitar, you're focused a lot on the position of the fingers. Are they curved properly when the student is playing? And sometimes on an online lesson, you can't even see the student's fingers clearly. So there are certain things maybe that I've found I had to let go. But it's also forced me to just approach what I say to students differently. And I think that has been very helpful to practice patience in that way, and to be, I can't just lift the child's hand and go, no, put it here. I have to actually talk them through it. Okay, so from this note, now move this finger over and find that, and finding ways to do, to work like that over a screen. It's been a challenge.
What contemporary musician do you think will not be forgotten in 100 years from now?
Wow. Just any contemporary musician?
Yeah, whichever you think would be like the most relevant throughout ages, if you will.
Throughout ages, it's
100 years is a long time, but at the same time, we still listen to Beethoven, Mozart, and still relevant, right?
Absolutely.
So, of contemporary musician, do you think who's on that level? On the level of Beethoven in your eyes?
It's really hard to put anybody up there on the same level with Beethoven. Beethoven was recognized as a genius in his own lifetime, and we have some wonderful contemporary composers. You know what? I'll tell you who. I think that if there's one living composer, let's say, whose music is still going to be incredibly popular 100 years from now, John Williams.
John Williams.
John Williams.
And why?
Well, so he's a film composer, and you name any number of the great Hollywood soundtracks, he wrote them. Star Wars, Jaws, Jurassic Park, E.T., the list goes on. This is all John Williams, and these themes, these wonderful romantic melodies, this wonderfully orchestrated music, and it's. Can you imagine?
What about Hans Zimmer? You know Hans Zimmer?
I know Hans Zimmer.
Gladiator,
yes, absolutely, and a fine composer. But I may be biased. I grew up with Star Wars, so from a very young age, you know, pa 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 pam, pam, da 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 da. But can you imagine the Star Wars movies without that soundtrack? Can you imagine Empire Strikes Back without bum 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 ba ba? You know, the music makes the films.
Of course, without question. Even Quentin Tarantino said, before I make a film, I actually come up with a soundtrack first.
And he's very good at that. You can tell those are very deliberate choices in terms of the songs that he uses. It's wonderful. So that the music is such an important element. You know, opera, ballet, they can't happen without the musicians in the pit.
Is it important to have musical education to become a successful musician today?
Yes, I think it's important to have musical education to become a successful member of society. Music education, aside from and you can get, you know, scientists to talk about the benefits for the brain of learning to read music, learning to play an instrument at a young age, and you know, you certainly see the benefits of being a musician when it comes to professional classical musicians today. You know, people performing into their 70s, 80s, 90s, going out there on stage because music keeps the brain fluid.
Active.
Very, very active. You're always learning. It really keeps it moving wonderfully.
The memory, right? They say the person who lives a long time uses his memory a lot, right? So this is part of the brain, and obviously with music, you have to remember, you know, whether you play notes or like even, you know, the lyrics, right? It has something to do with memory. So the more you visit those channels in your brain, right, as far as kind of playing out the imprint of that memory, the more it is active, the longer it prolongs your life in a way.
I mean, I certainly think so, and I agree 100% with what you say about revisiting those channels. I think of a performance, whether it's just for you yourself or in front of an audience, of a song, of a piece of music at the piano, it's a forward journey in time. It's an emotional drama, in a sense, that takes place sometimes with lyrics, sometimes if it's just instrumental music, just through a sequence of notes and harmonies. So I think of it like walking a path through the woods or through a field that you go through every day, and every time you walk that path, you know it a little better. You know every little twist and turn, and there's a rock there that I have to step over. Exactly. You look, and the more you play that piece of music, you know, once you've played and sung a song 100 times, you know, and we all have those songs that we remember that we just know every single word to, listen to it on repeat. Yeah, it's wonderful for the memory.
I see. Now, let's talk a little bit about what ego has, you know, what role does ego play for musicians' success in music industry? For example, you know, Kanye West has like a huge ego, and he's successful to this day. I mean, you know, he still puts out albums and everything. Is it important to have that, you know, tremendous amount of ego in order to get to where he's at, for example? Like, what role does ego play?
Ego,
musician.
so I think that well, I'll say for me personally, I think ego definitely plays a role. I don't think that you need to get too full of yourself, ideally, but a teacher said to me in high school that if you're planning on a career as a musician, as a performer of any kind, there's an inherent amount of ego in that, because on some level you think to yourself, I'm so good at this thing that other people are going to pay to see me do it. That's how good I am at this. And there's inherently ego there. I think it's necessary to have confidence in your own skills. Yeah, so ego is important, but I think you have to back it up with the work. You know, it doesn't matter how good you get if you take time off and you're not practicing and you're not continuing to maintain and even develop those skills. You know, you're going to backslide.
Just like an athlete, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You have to stay in training. That's
exactly right. At the end of the day, there'll be a challenger, and basically, you know, you'll lose.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about originality for a moment. Is everything remix?
Yeah, I think so. I think it
Everything
is.
is derivative.
Yeah,
Derives from somewhere.
Yeah, everything. Well, so I approach this from a music theory standpoint. You know, as I have a bachelor's degree in clarinet, a master's degree in orchestra conducting, and did some college teaching for a little while as well, a number of years ago, and have a very strong theory background. You know, there's if you have a song in a major key, there's really only 7 or 8 chords that you're supposed to be using, and every single piece of music is built out of those. Now, that I say that, and then of course there are exceptions to the rule. There will always be exceptions to the rule. But in terms of the actual building blocks of how you put music together, yeah, there hasn't been anything new in 400 or 500 years.
There's only 7 keys in the notes, right?
Well, so there's 12 notes. If you think about the 88 all together, you think about the 88 keys on the keyboard, the white keys and the black keys, that's just a sequence of 12 of those keys that repeats over and over and over and over again. And that combination of 12 tones is what has been used to compose all Western music for, say, the last 500 years. Every genre, not just classical music. Everything. Everything you hear on the radio today.
The whole bucket. Yeah. Now, so you do agree that everything is a remix?
Yeah.
So what is original then? Is there anything original?
I don't know how to answer that.
Who comes out with the original? Like, they say, like, all of the beats in hip hop, for example, right, have been already played out. Kind of, no one came up with anything that's, radically different from anything else that's ever been. It's kind of standing on the shoulders of the giants. So then, like, music is limited. Like, is it our comprehension, our brains cannot go beyond of what we have already, collectively achieved?
I don't think it's limited. C major is the key on the piano that is just all the white keys. It's the key that all students learn to play in at first. And Prokofiev, the great 20th century Russian composer, Sergei, said, and I'm going to paraphrase here, that there is still much great music to be written in C major, in the simplest of all the keys. It's not limited by those 12 tones. There's an infinite number of ways to arrange them, and part of the measure of a composer's competence and proficiency is taking these materials that everybody's been using for hundreds of years and finding a way to do something with them that sounds a little different and sounds a little original. Maybe does something that you don't expect. You have those songs that you listen to and suddenly it takes a little bit of a left and you go, and you perk up, didn't expect that to happen. Yeah.
I see. Do you have to have any particular type of physique to play piano? I remember there was a movie. What was that movie called? Gattaca.
I didn't see it. I know the film though.
And the character, what's her name? Anyway, like one of the main characters, she said, that piece can only be played. He's got 6 fingers on his, and he goes, something like, I heard that or something, or like that guy did, and she said, no, that piece can only be played with 6 fingers on one hand. And he was like, what?
Well, I don't know
Ethan Hawke was, the guy.
I don't know about a 6-fingered piece of piano music. Okay. I'm gonna have to go look at it.
They went to a concert, and she was a big fan, and he was kind of on the sidelines. He wasn't like too much into that guy. And that's what she said. 6 fingers. So
6 fingers.
Has there ever been a case like that? I mean, it's fictitious. It's fictional in the movie, but
I don't know. It's not to my knowledge, but I'm not the person to ask. I will say that on the piano, if we take that as an example, throughout history, many of the great pianists and composers for the piano have happened to have very large hands, very just long fingers that can reach a long way. Absolutely. So if we take another Russian composer, Sergei Rachmaninoff, who wrote almost exclusively for the piano, not many of his great works are for piano, and he was one of the great pianists of history. There are certain groups of chords that, if you don't have fingers of a certain size, you simply can't reach all of those notes. You have to roll it, or you have to break it up in some same way.
yeah.
There's a really great video on YouTube, a couple of musicians called Rachmaninoff's Big Hands. And you see the piano player, and he turns to the camera and he says, Rachmaninoff had big hands, these small hands. And so he starts playing this piece by Rachmaninoff, and a gentleman comes up behind him with these like big pieces of wood that have been carved out with all of the keys that you need, and so he just takes them and goes, "Arr," and tosses them back, "Arr," presses them down to get those big chords. Check it out, Rachmaninoff's Big Hands.
Gotta see. It's on YouTube, right?
Yeah, YouTube.
Yeah. Now, my question, of all different cultures, which culture contributed to classical music the most? In your eyes?
So classical music, up until the 20th century, was essentially a European and North American and South American, and if we think, of course, Russia is both Europe and Asia as well, but an outgrowth of European culture. If we talk about the place that has contributed the greatest number of composers whose music we still play, it would undoubtedly be Germany and Austria. Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, Haydn, Mendelssohn.
Do you ever wonder, like, why that region? What's with the...
I've often wondered that.
You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know.
What is it? Like, why not Britain? Why not, Ireland or,
I don't know. Something in the water. I don't know.
So you think it's... but today it's lost in a way, right? Or no? Would you say? Do you kind of... from time to time, do you get to see any new talent coming from those regions?
So
in regards to, classical music or maybe like, really original compositions? Yes,
there is.
Kind of like a lost art for them or something. Maybe it was just the melting pot of culture during that time that made it...
Certainly, and I mean, you have the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the city of Vienna, which was the musical capital of Europe for quite some time, and Beethoven was there, Mozart was there. I think that there is a school of thought that today, one of the reasons why we don't have Beethovens or Mozarts
of modern times.
Of modern times is that, I mean, Beethoven, not a psychologist, but from what I've read and what I understand, a lot of folks think that today, had Beethoven been evaluated by modern mental health professionals, he was seriously clinically depressed. I mean, music for him was not just an inspiration, it was a demon on his back making him. This is why he was such a reviser. I mean, he went through several different versions of all of his major works. The Fifth Symphony getting revised again and again and again, sometimes coming back to a work after several years and revisiting it. So, there is a school of thought that we don't have as many tortured souls today as perhaps there were, and that of course is a good thing. But
something was bothering him, right?
Yes, and I mean many of the great composers. I mean Chopin was depressed in many ways and died of tuberculosis. Schumann ended his life in a mental institution after a suicide attempt. That's insane. So a lot of these really brilliant people, but who had some problems and didn't have the modern...
Their minds kind of visited places that normal humans
Absolutely.
don't even dare.
Van Gogh is another wonderful example in the art world, yes. So, but I would say that actually there is one composer today who I think we're going to see much more of, and I think she's a teenager now. Her name is Alma Deutscher. And
German?
I'm not sure. I think she's half German and half English. And she recently had an opera premiered, I think, by the Vienna State Opera. You're going to have to check me on that. But she is the closest thing to a genuine modern-day Mozart that I think I've seen.
Look her up.
I saw her on The Ellen Show a number of years ago as, I think, an 8-year-old pianist, and she came on with an original piece she'd composed, and I said, my God, this is a child who writes music like she's Mozart, and she's 8, and she's just mastered the style, and it was just brilliant. Yeah.
Ben, thank you.
Absolutely, Renato, it's been a pleasure.
This has been Ben Ringer.